I wasn't really sure where to begin with this book, All Passions Spent by Vita Sackville-West, because there are so many incredible quotes. You can tell because I've got, just a few of them thematically organized here. So what we'll try to do is, by the way, my name is Stacey Goldring. I'm the facilitator for Chapter and Notes book clubs. We meet online and we also meet in person if you happen to live in Jacksonville, Florida, or you have a very nice fancy jet and you'd like to fly me out to wherever your book club is. I'm totally open to that as well. But anyway, we're going to discuss All Passions Spent by Vita Sackville-West. I'll go through a series of themes, and you can pick and choose what you want to listen to, fast forward, etc. But here's what we're going to cover. By the end of today, I'll be able to make some interesting connections between Vita Sackville-West, and as you probably know, but if not, you should know that she and Virginia Woolf were rather connected. I will also tell you how she's connected to J.P. Morgan. We'll be discussing some of her very cool, lesser known attributes. She was an amazing gardener. And I will weave in Elizabeth as in Elizabeth I. So stay tuned and buckle up, because here we go. First of all, what I'd like to do is go over the plot summary. There will be spoilers, so don't listen any further to this particular episode if you don't want to know about the plot. It basically opens with vultures. We have the children of the recently deceased Lord Slain at the home of their mother and father, who's now deceased, and they're discussing what to do with mother because Lord Slain has passed away. And they say this quote throughout the first section of this book, and it's so funny. They're always saying, "Oh, mother is wonderful." And it just so tickles me because it's incredibly sarcastic, and that should be your very first clue to the style of the book. We have several children. The most important, I feel, are Edith and Kay. Let's just call the other ones kind of grubby-handed, and they want to get their hands on the jewels and the money. And Mother surprises them, Lady Slain surprises them by saying, "You know what, I don't want any of it. I'm ready to move forward through in my life, and I don't need the money, I don't need the accolades, I don't need the charity work. I'm going to go ahead and live a very simple life. Going to get a small house that I saw about 30 plus years ago. Going to move in there, and I'm really not interested in seeing any of you." Again, very early in the book, we are dealing with a woman who doesn't really care about youth. It's one of the few books that I've read that celebrates old age, and that will be a theme that we'll get to. So anyway, Mom moves into her new house. She does a little refurbishing. Her children are very skeptical that she's going to pull this off. They think she's not so wonderful, and perhaps she's lost her mind. But she hasn't. She's enjoying gardening. She's enjoying hanging out with new friends that she's made. And she's looking back on her life. Someone shows up at her door, and this gentleman knows her from her time in India, where her husband was viceroy. He was in love with her, and she kind of like blocked it all out. And as he's sitting there, because she's in her 80s now, and he's a little bit younger, not that much younger, but she's realizing and she's recalling, "Oh my gosh, yeah, I do remember this man." And he kind of lays it all out to her, explaining that, you had a choice to make in life. You could have followed your passion, and that'll come up further, or you can do the traditional thing. It was clear that this man was in love with her, but she was already married, and she had made a Faustian deal, you could say, with the Victorian, Edwardian, because we're coming off Victorian times and going into Edwardian times, with what was expected of a woman. There are some beautiful passages at the beginning of the book where she is incredibly frustrated that she has to go ahead and buy into this thing called marriage. What she really wanted to do was be a painter. She didn't want to get married. She wasn't really in love with this guy, but she didn't know where else to turn. There's a beautiful quote on page 91 of my edition that says, middle of the page, her husband is explaining how everything in her life will be wonderful and set out for her, and her mother's like, it's a great marriage, etc. And she says, but where in all of this, where in the system, referring to marriage, where was there room for a studio? Because she wanted to paint. Now, we never find out if she has any talent, if she would have been a painter, etc. But the idea of where in the system was there room for a studio speaks to her own identity. And I think it's beautifully, beautifully, beautifully done. Anyhow, she meets with this man, they have a lovely tea, and she comes to terms with the life that she has chosen to lead. And that's wisdom, another theme of the book. Even though she could have had a life with this man who truly loved and worshiped her and would have given her room with a view, with a nod to Virginia Woolf, or a place for a studio, she chose the staid, the tried and true, what was expected of her. This is a universal theme that perhaps sounds a little bit familiar to you. Well, she follows what was considered the Facebook of that time. She had a clipping service, and this was a service that would go ahead and read all the newspapers and clip out stories and send them to you. Now, she wanted nothing really to do with her children. She realized they had lives of their own. They were only interested in what they were inheriting, the power, the house, the jewels, etc. But she was interested in the doings in the younger generations of her family, even though she didn't really want to visit with them because they just were too young, too upsetting the apple cart. She was fine being older and where she was and being reflective. But she would get this clipping service so she could keep up with things that were going on. And she had one granddaughter, which was also her namesake. Her name was Deb. It's Deb who comes to her in the last part of the book and explains to her that she's so grateful to her grandmother. Now, why would she be grateful to her great-grandmother? And why would she be grateful to her great-grandmother who really never wanted to visit with her? Well, going back to the visit she has with this man who had loved her earlier in life. He was an art collector and collected a fortune in art. After meeting with her, he dies, and he leaves his entire collection to her. She doesn't want it. She doesn't want the responsibility that comes with money. Now, perhaps you or me, we wouldn't mind being saddled with having to make decisions with the vast fortune. It sounds good, but this is wisdom talking. She didn't want any of it, so she left the entire art collection to the state. Going back now to the end of the story, she's sitting with her great-granddaughter, and her great-granddaughter explains to her that she was engaged to a young man who ticked every box. He was going to be wealthy. He had a title, blah, blah, blah. But she was so inspired by her grandmother giving up this fortune that she called off the engagement. Although her grandmother could never realize her dream of becoming a painter, she gives her great-granddaughter freedom. And that freedom is to become a musician. It's a beautifully written book. I highly recommend it. And that's basically the plot of Vita Sackville-West's All Passion Spent. Thank you. Oh, I know what else I'm supposed to say. If you liked this video, please go ahead and click on the notification bell so we can let you know when we'll talk more about Vita Sackville-West and all the other great titles that we'll be discussing. And also, please like and share. Thank you.